Soti, and welcome everyone to the weekly online Dhamma group, where we read and study together Buddhist texts. We are happy to be joined by Venerable Dhamma, who is residing in Sri Lanka and teaching at the meditation center, the Sirimangalam International Meditation Center. We're currently reading the discourses by the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw on the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. After 1 hour of reading, we will stop and have time for discussions and asking questions. Now, before we begin, we will take together the 5 precepts. Everyone is welcome to take part in this wholesome deed and recite together with us. Is there someone in the Discord who would like to lead the 5 precepts for us today?
May I?
Yes, thank you, Austin. You may start.
Ahan bante isaranena saha pancha ilani yachami. Dutiyampi ahan bante isaranena saha pancha silani yachami. Tatiyampi ahan bante isaranena
Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang Saranang Gacchami.
Buddhan saranam gacchami.
Dhammang Saranang Gacchami.
Dhammam saranam gacchami.
Sanghang Saranang Gacchami.
Sangham saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhan saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami.
Dutiyampi sangham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhan saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami.
Tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami.
Tisarnagamanang Nititang.
Amabante.
Arnatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Anatipata veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Adinnadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Adinnadana veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Kamesu Miccācara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Kamesu miccācara veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami.
Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami.
Sura Meraya Manjapamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Sura Meraya Majja Pamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami.
Imani Pancha Sikkhapadani Silena Sugating Yanti Silena Bhoga Sampada Silena Nibuting Yanti Tasma Silang Visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So we will continue today with the paragraph which starts with "It now remains." I will post a reading order in the chat for the Discord group. And as always, we read 2 paragraphs. If it's very short, you can read one more. And please remember to read carefully, slowly, and take pauses in between each paragraph so there's time for asking questions or explaining if something is maybe difficult to understand. So, Austin, would it be okay for you to start today?
Yes.
Thank you.
It now remains only to know what constitutes the middle path. To explain the path, the Blessed One began with a question in accordance with the traditional usage of the times. Kasa bhikkhave.
I can do the Pali if you want, if it's too hard.
Bande.
Katamacha sa bhikkhave Majjhima Padipada Tathagatena Abhisambuddha Chakhu Karni Jnana Karni Upasamaya Abhinyaya Sambodhaya Nibbanaya Samvatati.
Which means, what monks is the middle path understood by the Tathagata that produces vision, produces knowledge, and leads to peace, higher knowledge, penetrative insight, and nibbana. Was supplied by the Blessed One himself.
Ayameva Aryo Arthangiko Mago Sayatidang Sammaditthi Samma Sankappo Samma Vaja Samma Kamanto Samma Ajivo Samma Vayamo Samma Sati Samma Samadhi.
Only this noble eightfold path, namely right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration.
These, then, are the factors of the Eightfold Path, the middle path, which when fully understood by the Tathagata produced vision, produced knowledge, and led to peace, higher knowledge, penetrative insight, and to Nibbana.
So, I mean, it should be pretty obvious, but just to drive the point home as a reminder, the middle path is not the path of moderation. The middle path isn't described by the word middle. So when you say the middle way, you can't understand what you're referring to just by saying, oh, the middle way. Yes, I understand by that word middle. Middle doesn't have enough meaning. So this is like, people get the idea that when we hear about the Buddha taught the middle way, the Buddha taught the middle way, they think, okay, so moderation is Buddhism, right? Or Buddhism is a path of being in the middle. And so I've talked about this before, but this really just drives it home, and it should be glaringly obvious that the fact that it's the middle way is somewhat incidental, or at the very least, it's a byproduct of the perfection of it. So because the path is so perfect, it avoids the extremes. In fact, avoiding extremes isn't really the way to follow the path, right? You can't just say, I'm not going to torture myself, I'm not going to engage in sensuality. It's not really how it works. When you practice the Eightfold Noble Path, the practice of the Eightfold Noble Path is automatically in the very middle, meaning it avoids any kind of extreme. It avoids the extremes of torturing oneself and the extreme of sensual indulgence. So the idea of it being the middle way was in some ways most important for these five monks, because they, along with many people at the time who were following them and following people like them and who were following similar practices, people who believed that this other extreme was the way to go. And so talking about it as the middle way, don't misunderstand, that's not the most important quality of it, that it's in the middle. The most important quality of it is that it's right, and it's right everything, it's perfect everything, perfect in these 8 factors. And so the 8 factors are really Buddhism. I want to say, what is Buddhism? Buddhism, the way of the Buddha, is this path of 8 factors, which usually he doesn't describe as the Majjhima Patipada. He usually talks about it as the Arya Tangika Magga. So much more often emphasizing the nobility of it, the purity of it, the highness of it, the exalted nature. Arya being a word that had come to mean, like the Aryans use this because they feel they're special, right? Or they're supreme white supremacists and that sort of thing. But the word Arya came to mean this, something that is supreme, something that is noble, or of the highest sort, or of a higher sort. So this path is of the highest sort. It's perfect in 8 regards. But it's not to trivialize the fact of it being perfect in terms of finding the perfect middle, or the perfect middle. It's like this idea that I often talk to with students, telling them to be reasonable. When people ask a lot of the questions about worldly affairs, the answer is often be reasonable. And that really is an expression of this being in the middle, avoiding any kind of extreme, because you can be very obsessed about things must be this way or they must be that way, and you become very rigid. No? But the middle way is somehow very reasonable, because it lets go of lets go of everything. And once you've let go of everything, you're the most reasonable anyone could possibly be. Because there's wisdom. You can't let go without perfect wisdom as well.
Thank you for the explanation, Bante. The definition of the middle path has now been given. The detailed exposition of this Eightfold Path will have to wait until next week. I think I'll just finish here. By virtue of having given respectful attention to this great discourse on turning of the wheel of Dhamma, may all of you good people present in this audience be able to avoid the wrong path, namely the two extremes, and follow the Noble Eightfold Path, or the middle path, thereby gaining vision and higher knowledge, which leads to the realization of Nibbana, the end of all suffering. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So there's always at the end of a talk there would be a traditional blessing and appreciation of the audience and of the Dhamma and so on, and a wish for everyone to benefit from it.
Part 3. Delivered on Saturday, 13th of October 1962. Today is the full moon day of October. The monks have observed the rains retreat Vasa for 3 months since the first day after the full moon of July. Today is the last day of the 3-month retreat. During the rains retreat, monks are enjoined not to make overnight journeys except for special reasons as approved by the Buddha. They can leave their residence up to 7 days for such special reasons. At the termination of tonight, starting from early dawn of tomorrow, the period of the 3 months comes to an end. Monks can henceforth move about freely for overnight journeys.
This is actually a bit of a divergence from the topic. He's now going to talk a little bit more. I mean, it should be quite interesting if you're not familiar with this. It's very valuable knowledge, but it's more relating to what's happening at that moment in his monastery.
The invitation ceremony. Accordingly, monks who have business to attend to elsewhere are leaving the residence tomorrow. On the eve of their departure, that is, this evening, they have to observe the invitation, Pavarana. It is a ceremony in which a monk invites criticism from his fellow monks in respect of what they have seen, heard, or suspected about his conduct. There may be lapses or faults that one is unaware of oneself, but which are noticed by others. If any fault or offense has been committed unwittingly, the other monks of the assembly can point it out now, and suitable corrective measures can be taken. Making amends in consequence of such criticisms constitutes the observance of discipline leading to the purification of conduct, sila visuddhi. Only when purification of conduct is assured, one starts practicing meditation for the attainment of purification of mind, citta visuddhi, and purification of view, ditthi visuddhi.
Inviting criticism is highly conducive to maintaining the purity of Buddha's dispensation and to spiritual attainments such as jhana, the path, and its fruition. That is why the Buddha laid down the rule requiring formal invitation to the Sangha for criticism when there are 5 bhikkhus in residence on the full moon day of October, or to one another if there are fewer than 5 bhikkhus. This is a rule of discipline that a virtuous bhikkhu should pay great heed to, and in conformity with it should earnestly invite criticism concerning his conduct and behavior. If any criticism is forthcoming, it should be warmly welcomed in the spirit in which it is given, and the necessary atonement should be made accordingly.
Bhante, what kind of criticisms are presented in this occasion? Or if it's possible for you to tell us.
I've never seen anyone actually criticize anyone else during this.
Thank you.
I have heard about it, and I heard that the results were not good. Results were not positive. So there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, it shouldn't be that common for there to be criticism outstanding. If the monks have been living together, they should already be criticizing each other, right? But second, we're not talking about the time of the Buddha where there were arahants and people pure and perfect. So there's a reluctance to, especially in large monasteries, there's a reluctance to, I mean, not even a reluctance, it would be absurd for anyone to think of people would be, there's a feeling that it would be absurd to actually say something during that period. Which, I mean, that may sound somewhat discouraging, but it's the reality of things. I think it only works in groups where there's a very strong tradition of actually taking the time to think of criticisms. And we have a strong tradition of it being acceptable to say something during that time. It's just become, in most places, unacceptable to say anything. Just socially unacceptable. Unfortunately, I mean, what we can take away from it is it's a great concept, and it's something to live by personally. So you can think that in two ways. You should invite other people to criticize, and you should be prepared that when others do criticize you, invited or not, that you should be, of course, careful to not allow the ever-present anger and fear to arise. Anger when people criticize you, and fear of being criticized, and sort of thing. So it's not like
I was just going to say that it sounded like it's such a good practice. Basically, everyone, I mean, helping you with helping you with your blind spots. Basically, just pointing out something that you don't see for yourself.
Well, it's a fine line, because if it becomes too, people become too comfortable, then they become critical of others. This happens as well. Our monks are overly critical. The Buddha was not big on criticizing others for obvious reasons. So that is a problem as well. And I think that's in places where they do implement it, that's the problem that can come up, is that people become very critical of each other. Because what you said, it sounds good, but what you said, you have to understand that it leaves open the idea where people can nitpick and rightfully point out people's defilements, rightfully in the sense that they're right, rightfully only in the sense that they're right that these people have those defilements, but not right in the sense that it's not good to point out everyone's defilements all the time. It's much, much, much more commonly valuable, much more often valuable to allow them, to give them the space. So when someone gets angry, you don't have to call them out on it. You just don't reply with anger. And then they have to taste the anger themselves, and that's the best thing you can do for them. Give them the opportunity to work through it and to see that it was useless and harmful. But responding and saying, hey, look at how terrible you are with your anger, that obviously doesn't come to any benefit. So in some ways, the practice itself, as it stands, from what I've seen, it stands as a symbol of humility. Having to say that, having to put yourself out there and say, if you've heard anything, seen anything, heard anything, or suspected anything about me, I invite you to criticize me. Just saying that is of some value. But criticizing others, you have to be very careful, and we're just not good enough, generally speaking, to be able to criticize properly and when it's appropriate, and to know when it's going to be helpful. And also, we're not equipped to accept other people's criticism, generally speaking. It's hard. Even for people who are practicing, I've seen people who are practicing well, but still get angry when they're criticized, and that's understandable. I mean, not everybody is an arahant.
It is just like being pointed out as smudge or stain on one's face by a friend when one is about to leave for a social function or a public gathering. The friendly intimation is received with appreciation, and the smudge on the face is removed in time to avoid derision or sniggering. One is thankful to the friend for having the kindness to point out the stain on one's face. Likewise, a bhikkhu should welcome with gratitude any fault of his being pointed out by his fellow monks and attend to its removal. This practice is essential for maintaining the purity of the Buddha's teaching. Not just following the tradition as a mere formality, but sincerely wishing to eradicate one's own faults and failings. A bhikkhu should invite criticism from his fellow monks and welcome them. At the same time, he should also offer in turn criticisms to other bhikkhus if he happens to see any faults in them. By thus pointing out each other's faults and making sincere efforts to remove them, the holy life can be maintained in a state of faultless purity. That was the reason behind the Buddha's laying down of this code of discipline for the bhikkhus.
So Bante, when you said not exactly that, but something like we are not good at criticizing, could it be related to the way people spoke back in the time of the Buddha, or even in Myanmar, where people can be more subtle or nicer. I don't know how to exactly say this, but as far as I know, in the language spoken there in the Buddha's time, they were able to speak very kindly, but still being able to criticize. So it's like a skill of language, maybe.
That's a skill of wisdom, but really the only one who can be sure is the Buddha. The rest of us have to be somewhat careful. Be reasonable about it, I guess is the best way to put it. It's very easy to be unreasonable and nitpick and obsess and focus more on the faults of others than on your own. You shouldn't ever focus on the faults of others. If you're going to criticize them, it better be completely free from any kind of attachment on your part. You better be completely free from any kind of aversion or disliking of the faults that you see. That's what makes it hard. But you should. It's good. I mean, you do see it. If a monk gets angry or something, other monks will gently point out, let it go, let it go. Or monk is very greedy or something, they might be gently chided for it. But you also have to. It's easy, especially for newcomers or for people out from the outside, to look in and see monks being greedy or angry or whatever, and just blow it completely out of proportion, blow it way out of proportion. Monks, lay people are people, and even people who are practicing are still going to falter. So for the most part, we make allowances. There's excesses. Like one example that comes to mind for me is this bulat, or betel, we say in English, I think. There's this narcotic that they give to the monks here and in Thailand, not so much in Thailand anymore, but it's very common here, along with chewing tobacco. And it has about the effect that you might think of creating addiction and also kind of nastiness. When the monks don't get the betel, when they haven't had it for a while, they become irritable, overly critical, and just not very nice. But then when they take it, they're nice again and they're happy again. It's so I've been, gently, jokingly, kind of critical of that. But absolutely, I am my view on it is that it's very wrong, and it's not the end of the world problem, but it's a problem, and not good. And I don't agree. I don't think it has any place in the monastic system. I think for other outsiders hearing about this, seeing it, learning about it, are rightly horrified or at least turned off by it. Because there's no question you can see. I guess I don't know firsthand because I haven't had that addiction, but you can see it in them. It's pretty obvious that it's a real problem. So things like that, I think there should be some pushback, and you shouldn't let it creep in. I think in some places, money might be an issue. Like if a monk started using money, the problem is so many monks use money, and in most places it's a losing argument because monks tend to use money. But things like that, you could, I think, if it's a breach of the Vinaya, then you put your foot down. Like if monks are spraying insecticide or something, then I think you would have to, it would be your duty to speak up. I mean, obviously, right?
Does it then
I think-
also
I think
have to do? Sorry.
The point is, don't just nitpick. It's not about criticizing people. Hey, I saw you were angry the other day. You shouldn't do that. You can't go that deep. But if someone is saying, hey, so this insecticide thing, I've never seen a monk spray insecticide. I'm not sure that I have. I've seen things similar to insecticides, and I didn't say anything. Long time ago. But yeah, so at the Pavarana, that would be something that I would recommend bringing up. Hey, so this insecticide thing, that's not cool. We should really stop that. Often it's better just to make it a general thing rather than say, hey, I saw you killing insects. Bad. Don't do that anymore. Sometimes you want to be a little bit more general about it.
Thank you for explaining, Bhante. And the next person would be you, Osanda. I hope I pronounce it correctly.
Yes, thank you for pronouncing it correctly. Today, 50 bhikkhus who resided here during the Rains retreat assembled in the Uposatha hall to make formal requests to the Sangha for criticism. Each monk participated in this invitation ceremony, which has taken nearly an hour. I have come here straight from the assembly to continue the discourse that I gave last week.
So an hour is a long time, which makes me think there might have been some criticizing going on. He obviously doesn't make mention of that, but it could also have been that there was chanting as well. I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't much criticism going on and it was just more ceremony taking an hour. Because they will start before the ceremony, they will do chanting, daily chanting, which can take up to a half an hour. Maybe not half an hour, but take some time. And then after there will be chanting as well. And then there's also the period of assembly and the period of confessing of offenses, which is standard to do before. There's probably a bunch of stuff involved.
Sadhu Bhante, I'll continue with the elaboration of the Eightfold Path. Last week we dealt with only the headings of the middle path, otherwise called the Eightfold Path. I will now elaborate on them. Number 1, right view, Samma Ditti. Number 2, right thought, Dhamma Sankappa. Number 3, right speech, Dhamma Vacca. Right action, Dhamma Kammanta. Number 5, right livelihood, Dhamma Ajiva. Number 6, right effort, Dhamma Vayama. Number 7, right mindfulness, Dhamma Sati. Number 8, right concentration, Samma Samadhi. The Eightfold Path can be summarized under 3 groups: morality, sila; concentration, samadhi; wisdom, panya; right speech, right action, and right livelihood form the morality group, or path factors of morality, sila maganga. By practicing right speech, right action, and right livelihood, morality is established. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration are the path factors of concentration, Samadhi Maganga. By practicing them, concentration is established. Right view and right thought are the path factors of wisdom, Panya Maganga. Developing the right view and right thought leads to wisdom of insight, Vipassana Panya. Wisdom of path, Magga Panya, and wisdom of fruition, Phala Panya. That is both mundane and supramundane wisdom. I will now describe each of the path factors in detail, emphasizing the practical aspects.
So Maganga is a word that means factor of the path. Magga is path. Anga is like it's just member. Like Bojanga, if you know the word Bojanga. Bojanga is from Bodhi Anga. So those are factors of enlightenment. Maganga just means factors of the path. When he says Vipassana Panya, Magga Panya, and Phala Panya, what that means is that everything up to the moment of experiencing Nibbana, up until that moment, basically is called Vipassana. All of the wisdom that you gain, that's the wisdom that comes during the course of the practice, the sort of gradual change in attitude and perspective and outlook, seeing the 3 characteristics that frees the mind from the grip of clinging. But at the moment of cessation, the moment of the realization, the epiphany, the sort of last straw where the mind finally just says nothing is worth clinging to and lets go. So from that point on, it's Magga and Phala. It's called Magga and Phala. It's basically just Phala. It's the fruition, which is super mundane. So where he says that is both mundane and super mundane, Vipassana is mundane, Magga and Phala is super mundane. These are the 3 different kinds of wisdom, you could say. I mean, they're really just 2. There's mundane and super mundane. Magga and Phala are really the same thing. It's just technical because the first moment of experiencing cessation is Magga, because it's the moment when the defilements are cut off. The rest of the moments don't cut off the defilements because they've already been cut off. So technically, it's only the first moment that's important. So it's special, but in quality, it's exactly the same as the next moment. So it can often be quite confusing to hear about Magga and Phala, and you just have to pair them together and say it's the experience of Nibbana, and there's just a technical distinction. It's all really just Phala. It's just the fruition, but first moment is important because it's what technically is the moment that cuts off the defilements.
The path factor of right speech.
Sorry, Osanda. Thank you for reading, but you've read 2 paragraphs or 3. Please let the next person.
Apologies. Thank you.
No problem.
Sorry.
Yes, Sanda, you would be the next.
Yeah, sorry. My voice.
Oh.
What monks is right speech? It is the avoidance of telling lies, of slander, of harsh, abusive language, of idle chatter. These monks is called right speech. In this definition given by the Buddha, abstinence or avoidance constitutes right speech. Thus, it should be noted that even when occasion arises for one to utter false speech, slander, abuse, or idle chatter, if one restrains oneself from doing so, one is then establishing the practice of right speech. In reality, right speech is samavacha virati, one of 52 mental concomitants, cetasika, a member of the class called abstinence. Virati, however, when one refrains from false speech, one will be engaged only in speech that is truthful, gentle, beneficial, and which promotes harmony. The essential point here is that abstinence from wrong speech amounts to the wholesome deed of observing morality. One who takes the vow of refraining from false speech in observance of the 5, 8, or 10 precepts has to refrain at the same time from 3 evil vocal acts of slandering, abusing, and idle chatter too.
Yeah, so right speech doesn't mean you have to talk in order to have right speech. Doesn't mean the more things you say that are right, the better. It's usually the opposite. I mean, the fewer things you say is usually better. Usually a good sign when you talk less.
In addition, whenever one sees, hears, smells, touches, or thinks, if one realizes by contemplation the real nature of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self concerning these sense objects, no defilements can arise which would cause the utterance of wrong speech. This amounts to temporarily dispelling latent defilements, anusaya kilesa, including wrong speech by means of insight.
This is important. What the meaning here is that at the moment of practice of mindfulness, there is no potential for the causes of wrong speech or wrong action. So the Eightfold Noble Path, we can understand it in two ways. We can understand it as individual qualities that we should strive to develop. So right speech is something we should strive for. We should think about our speech and say, hey, this thing I'm going to say, is it right speech? That thing that I said, was it right speech? This thing that I'm saying, am I speaking rightfully? No, we should consider like this. And with all of the 8 path factors, you can intellectually consider them and use them as a guide. It's great. I mean, that's practically, in a worldly sense, that's very important. But the other way you can look at it is that what it means is that the practice of the Buddha's teaching is perfect. When you practice the Buddha's teaching, and it's not this intellectual reflection on your speech, when you practice mindfulness, when you do walking and you're aware, when you walk, you're where you walk, when you sit, you know it just as sitting, when there's pain, you know it just as pain, and so on. When you do that, it's perfect. It's perfect in all ways, including speech and action, view, thought. All these 8 factors are perfect. So it's a way of saying you can't criticize this teaching. You can't criticize this practice. And it's noble and it's perfect. How is it perfect? It's perfect in these 8 ways. In ways that most other activities that we do are not. Most of the time, most of our day, most of our lives without mindfulness are full of breaches of the 8 factors. But when you practice the Buddha's teaching, when you really put into practice the Dhamma, you fulfill all of the 8 factors. That's a way of saying, of pointing out how perfect it is. That's what is meant here by this idea of abstinence. It's enough to abstain. Right speech doesn't actually mean any kind of speech. It's just refraining from the mental qualities that would incline you to speak wrongly.
As insight knowledge gets fully developed, Nibbana is realized through the knowledge of the Noble Path. When that happens, wrong speech will have been completely eradicated by virtue of right speech of the Noble Path. The Visuddhimagga commentary, therefore, states that the first path, that of stream winning, dispels false speech. The third path, that on non-returning, dispels slander and abusive language. Here by speech or language is meant volition. It is possible to utter harsh language unaccompanied by volition. The fourth path, that of arahantship, dispels idle chatter. It should be understood here, however, that all kinds of lying, slander, and abusive language that would have caused rebirth in the lower realms have already been got rid of by the first path. The path factor of right speech, Dhammacakkappavattana, has to be allowed until all 4 noble paths have been established.
Ante, how would you, I mean, I don't know if this is a good question or if I can formulate it correctly, but how would you differentiate this between just non-action, like there are other religious groups who just avoid any kind of action and say this is the correct way to practice, but they still practice something differently.
Well, it's missing in some of the other factors, I guess, is the easiest way. I mean, you could also argue that without the other factors, even though you don't do this or don't do that, you still have the desire to do them. So if someone wants to kill but holds oneself back, they don't really have the right action, because they don't have the right action cetasika. I don't think. I don't know if technically they could. I think in that moment they don't. I mean, it would be just like if someone is physically restrained, like wants to kill someone but is being held back by other people physically. You could say, well, they're not killing, so good for them. But they're just not killing because they're being held back. I think it's the same. I'm not entirely sure because the cetasika is not 100% clear to me, but it seems that you can't really say if you want to kill, if you want to steal, if there's still that inclination to do it, then you don't have the virati. That I think I'm correct in saying that. So most likely people, even though they don't do things, they can do it because keeping precepts can be for many reasons, out of fear, out of pride, or lots of bad reasons for keeping the precepts.
So you don't really focus on not doing a certain thing, but you focus on working on the reason that would make you do this thing, the cause.
You work on trying to see clearly. When you see clearly, you give up any potential for inclining towards any of that.
Yes. It's because you also explained that the only true way where you can fulfill the Eightfold Noble Path is at the moment of enlightenment. So there's, as far as I understand, the conventional way of practicing it, and then the highest possible way.
As Mahasi Sayadaw points out, even during the practice of vipassana, the mind is mostly free from wrong speech and wrong action because of the purity of the mind.
Okay, thank you, Wanda. I took up the last few minutes, but since we've hit the hour, sorry about that. We will stop here today. We will move to the Q&A, and maybe we can take a moment if anyone else in the Discord has something to ask with their mic. Now would be a good chance, but you can also ask later on if your question doesn't come up now. And everyone is welcome to ask in the chat, and we will try to ask the important questions, all of the important questions, and prioritize mostly meditation questions, and also in general Buddhism, if it's about the text, what we just read, and if they are urgent. So if you have important questions, now is a good time to ask them.
We haven't read the next paragraph basically, but my question is related to that. So it's basically describing sexual misconduct for a man, and I was just wondering if there is I don't know, similar layout for a woman.
Yeah, it should be exactly the same.
But if you read the paragraph, then it sounds pretty different. Like under the protection of father, mother, brother, sisters, relatives, clan, and their elders. So this would be like just young age, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's not precisely young age. It's a minor with parents.
Okay.
So a minor having romantic and sexual intercourse with minors at the time was, I don't think, taboo. I'm not trying to defend it. I'm not going. It's there's very real and important reasons as to why it's wrong to have romantic involvement with minors. No question about it. But I mean, to some extent, the Buddha is appealing to people's reason at the time, and trying to be reasonable in the society. I mean, he's not saying that if a minor doesn't have protection, that it's okay, no matter what age they are. But the Buddha is being, when he says these sorts of things, when he talks about it, he's generalizing, giving an idea. Because again, of course, the precepts are not everything. The precepts do not cover all morality. Like gambling isn't in one of the precepts, but some people will say gambling should really be a part of them. Torture isn't in the 5 precepts. Sexual assault isn't in the 5 precepts. So people will say, well, it fits in this one or that one, but it really doesn't. The precepts are vows people take not to do 5 fairly specific things that tend to cover the extremes. They don't cover everything, and they're not meant to. So the idea behind the 3rd precept is to give an idea of what is the most extreme sort of romantic activity, sexual activity that is the ones that cross a line and will lead to rebirth in hell. I think some of them that it doesn't mention are a little more, I guess, obvious. Like sexual assault isn't mentioned, torture isn't mentioned, but it's like if you're doing those things, or if you're interested in doing those things, you're already way over the line. It's messy, I think. But I mean, the 3rd precept is pretty simple. It's messy in the sense that the details of it can cause confusion, but in broad strokes, it's pretty simple. You should only engage, as a layperson, you should only engage in romantic activity that is pure. It's not pure, any of it, but it's pure in the sense that nobody's being taken advantage of, nobody's being betrayed, no one is being hurt. There's one of the 10 brahmacharyas. One of the 10 brahmacharyas is contentment with one's spouse. So brahmacharya isn't necessarily celibacy. I mean, it is when we use the 8 precepts, but there is a type of brahmacharya which means content. It's called santara santuti or something like that. It's contentment with one's spouse. That is to some extent considered pure. It's pure in a way that adultery isn't, and sexual misconduct of other sorts isn't. I don't think it's that hard to understand sexual misconduct. There are questions like, is prostitution? Sorry, this might not be appropriate for this. These topics are somewhat adult, and we've kind of made a determination not to go too deeply into them in public spheres. Probably it's not appropriate for YouTube. So we might have to, if you have questions about that sort of thing, it's much better to talk about your teacher.
Yes, thank you, Bante.
Bande, I just thought I'll clarify. It said somewhere above that in brackets, it should be understood here, however, that all kinds of lying, slander, and abusive language that would have caused rebirth in the lower realms have already been got rid of by the first path. Just wanted to clarify that because above it said something like maybe different. Um,
Yeah, I mean, something that isn't made completely clear when you learn about the definitions or the characteristics of the 4 paths is that they're also incremental. Like the first path doesn't, strictly speaking, get rid of harsh speech. For all intents and purposes, it gets rid of harsh speech. A Sotapanna will not be capable of harsh speech, but they'll still technically be capable of it. And practically, they will speak in ways that are not entirely kind all the time, but they will never engage in the crudest sorts of speech because they have gotten rid of a huge amount of greed and anger. Just haven't technically gotten rid of all greed and anger or delusion.
right. Thank you, Bante.
Bante, the first question that we have: why must one view life and its suffering as a problem to be solved or a disease to be cured?
Well, I think it's wrong to look at anything as a problem. I think part of the problem is seeing things as problems. We should see, I mean, if you study and consider the words of the Buddha, it becomes pretty clear that the Buddha was teaching us not to see things as problems to be solved, but as experiences to be understood, even suffering. The First Noble Truth As we'll learn, I think, at some point he's going to spell it out, what it says in the sutta. The First Noble Truth is that there is suffering, but he doesn't stop there. He says suffering is to be fully understood. Parinyaya, that's what he says. Not suffering is to be solved or cured. He doesn't say that. He says it's to be understood. Because it's when you understand suffering that you abandon desire for suffering. But this is the thing. It's easy to criticize when you think the Buddha's teaching is about solving problems or curing diseases. It becomes fairly subjective, like, well, how do you know it's a problem, and so on. Or what do you think is a problem? It's debatable whether it's a problem, or so on. And it just doesn't resonate. But if you ask someone whether they're against understanding, I don't know if there's any such people who are against understanding and prefer not to understand reality, prefer not to know the truth. I guess to some extent there is. But you have to be pretty delusional to prefer being deluded, and to not think that, to not acknowledge, at least acknowledge that understanding is valuable. Understanding is such a highly prized quality, coveted, and seems so far out of our reach most of the time. People, if anything, there's a belief that it's impossible to understand. And some religions reflect this. They believe that only God can understand, or only God's higher beings can understand. But nonetheless, if you were to tell them, if you were to ask them, well, in that case, if you could understand, let's not go there, but from Buddhist perspective, it is possible, and it is the most valuable thing, and it is the goal. It is the path. The path is understanding. And this, practically speaking, is very important, because meditators are often trying to solve their problems, and it leads them to a lot of stress and suffering in the beginning. When a meditator is trying to fix their mind, something comes up and they say, hey, that's wrong, I got to fix it. So they try to fix it, and they stress and they worry and they suffer, and they develop great aversion towards these things that they want fixed. It's very important as a teacher to explain, and as a meditator to understand that we're not trying to fix problems, we're trying to understand reality. That's the attitude, that's the approach. And I think it's without reproach. You can't say, oh, well, in that case, Buddhism is all wrong. There's really no quarter for you to say when we phrase it like that, when we pointed out that that is Buddhism. This is irrefutable. No one can come and say, oh, well, in that case, Buddhism isn't for me. If they do, then I don't know what to say. They really are lost.
The next question, Bante, is animal talk the opposite speech of right speech? Is there speech that is above right speech?
So animal speech is a translation of Tirachana Katha, I think, which is a kind of wrong speech. I mean, I don't think the way you've phrased it is correct. There is right speech, there is wrong speech. They are opposites, I guess, but there are different kinds of wrong speech. Right speech is the abstinence from all of those kinds of wrong speech, and more correctly, more accurately, It's the cetasika, this quality of mind, the factor of mind, which refrains, which is uninclined towards the qualities that lead to wrong speech. So it's not just refraining. Just keeping your mouth closed isn't going to be a right speech. It's the actual active abstention through qualities of mind. Bring up this. I don't know what you mean by speech above right speech. I don't understand that.
The next question, Bante. What are cetasika? How is knowing about them generally considered helpful for the practice? Are those more or less the things we note in meditation?
Some of them are noted, some of them are not. Some of them can seem fairly theoretical in the sense that you're never really going to experience them, but they're a part of the experience nonetheless. So Cetasikas are qualities of mind. Just like with water, you have water has color and temperature, shape and volume. It has dissolved solids and all of that. So in the same way, consciousness, every moment of consciousness, every moment of experience has different qualities. So one mind might be an angry mind, another mind might be a greedy mind, another mind might be a mindful mind. So they have different cetasikas, means they have different qualities to them. And then there are many qualities which are just universal to every mind. It means what can you say about an experience? There's contact and that sort of thing. Every moment has Vedana, for example, has a quality of feeling to it.
The next question, Bante. Do you think AI is a good tool for daily answers regarding the teachings?
No, I don't. I mean, it might be a good tool for getting general knowledge about the teachings. Nothing deeper than that. And it's also going to be problematic because there will be instances where it gets things wrong. I mean, there is of course, the other problem that it creates laziness. It removes the connection with the teacher. It creates the breakdown of the transmission of the Dhamma as people develop the habit of relying on relying on artificial means of obtaining the Dhamma. Which is, it isn't always going to be bad. And certainly there will be people who benefit from artificial, I mean, it's not even AI really, it's just the regurgitation and composition of information that is already out there. There's no AI involved really. If anything, it's AAI, artificial intelligence. It's not even real artificial intelligence. So it's all the information that's out there, and you're accessing it and being presented it in ways that are standard. There's standard and very easily accessible means. So instead of reading an entire book, you can get a summary of it, or you can ask a question about the book and get a response that's often fairly accurate. It's a good way to get information, which can be very valuable. But it will be mostly valuable to those people who have the qualities required to properly interpret the teachings. So if you have those, well, it wasn't the information that, I mean, the information can point you in the right direction. It can be invaluable, it can be priceless for sure. And getting that information in a easy to digest format can be good. But it's, I think, too easy to mistake it for something deeper and to rely on it. Like as a teacher, for example, it's never going to challenge you. It's never going to see or point out the problems that you have. It's nothing like a teacher. I mean, it is a lot like a teacher. It's going to sound very much like a teacher, but it's never going to teach you like a teacher would, like a good teacher would. But that being said, if you have the qualities in you innately and you don't need training, just getting the information can be enough, right? Upadisa heard half a stanza and became a sotapanna. The information is out there, and these machines that are able to, or these algorithms that are able to regurgitate it and present it in a way that is easily accessible. There's value in that for sure. Again, it may not be completely accurate. You have to be careful. And the worst thing is to take it for more than it actually is. If you rely on it, and it can hasten the decline of the Buddhasasana. I mean, it makes me think, and it's not the same thing, but it reminds me of the Patimokkha. The Patimokkha is the rules of the monkhood. And monks are supposed to try to memorize those rules. There's 227 of them. Most monks won't be able to. But many monks, or a good number of monks should be able to. In fact, 4 monks should never stay together during the rains. When the time is coming up to the rains, one monk must learn the Patimokkha. If one monk cannot memorize the Patimokkha, those 4 monks should not stay together. They should separate. So that, because 3 monks or less is okay, but if 4 monks live together, they have to recite the Patimokkha rules. So one monk should learn it. But what I'm getting at is that in Sri Lanka, apparently, they've decided to just start reading from a book and circumventing it. Because, hey, we have books. And I was thinking today, in the time of the Buddha, they didn't have books with the Dhamma in it. So that's probably the argument that's being made, is that we have this thing now. We don't really need to memorize them because we have books that we can read from. So they just read the rules outright. So the conclusion that's it's probably not a good thing, and it's probably hastening the decline of the Buddha Sasana, of the monastic sangha, because people aren't putting out the effort, and they don't need to put out the effort anymore. So I think AI, what we call AI, these large, what are they, LLMs? What is the acronym? I don't know, LLM. Probably got it wrong, but something like that.
The large language models, you mean?
Right, they're called LLMs. Not really AI, but these things make people lazy for sure. They are going to take away our mental capacity, reduce our mental capacity. And from a Buddhist perspective, some of that's not so bad, because we don't want to be burdened by intellectual activity anyway, right? We want to keep things simple and be very real. But it's also going to inhibit that as well. It's going to inhibit our capacity to investigate reality. Things like having to memorize the Patimokkha. You think, well, memorizing the Patimokkha, what a skill that is totally outside of the path, right? You'd be surprised. Like any other difficult training, it's a real learning experience. It's hard, and it's taxing, and it challenges you, because you get bored and you get averse to it. And once you've done it, it's a great duty to have done and to keep up. So I'm kind of off on a tangent here, but it's the same kind of idea, that the ease and the immediate access to everything is not necessarily a good thing. Can be valuable, but relying on these things is weakening some of the important institutions, like memorizing texts, for example.
To add on what you said with laziness, Bhante, it also takes, I see it like, it takes the life out of the teachings if you always get the perfect answer and don't have to put a lot of effort in getting what you're looking for. I mean, for me, it can be good maybe for looking up a certain text, a certain paragraph or whatever, but which also makes you lazy. And you said the connection is missing with a real teacher, and it just gets, you lose this kind of sacredness. I don't know if it's correct to say this, but I think it loses its meaning if you just, a little bit of it at least, depending on how you use it.
Yeah, I mean, even without LLMs, people who study a lot of Dhamma tend to have a very difficult time practicing. Just people who study books. Books is a good example. In some ways, having to memorize the texts in order to study them is valuable, because it limits your ability. It puts it in perspective. If you don't have the mental capacity, the patience, let's put it simply, if you don't have the patience to memorize it, it's arguable that you shouldn't have access to that text. I'm not precisely that, but to some extent, there's a relationship there. Like someone who memorizes the Patimokkha can be said to have access to the Patimokkha. But if you just are able to look up the rules in a book, you haven't really put in that work. You should have memorized it. So there was a monk who wanted to recite the Patimokkha here. And I said, oh, you can do the Patimokkha? He said, yeah, with a book. And I said, but do Sri Lankan monks not? And he said, no, very few can memorize the Patimokkha. So those are some thoughts on that topic. Not exactly an essential topic. I'm assuming that we don't have a lot of questions that are of urgent necessity. People aren't asking meditative questions. That's a bit discouraging.
Bhante, the next question. Is it reasonable to intellectually understand the state of Nibbana as the moment one got rid of all the conventional knowledge, habits and beliefs, and all sorts of worldly affairs that had been accumulated over many lifetimes?
Nibbana is freedom from suffering. I think you should probably keep it a lot simpler than what you've said. Nibbana is freedom from suffering. Comes from letting go. Letting go comes from seeing clearly. Seeing clearly comes from looking with a proper attitude. Mindfulness, basically. Mindfulness comes from practice of reinforcing your perception, your basic perception of things as they are, like seeing is seeing, hearing is hearing, pain is pain. That's really the Dhamma right there.
The next question, Bhante. Meditating has an effect on people near us, but does it have an effect on people that are far away from us? I have people I didn't hear from in a long time searching for me after I started meditating.
I think there's room for that. I wouldn't want to put too much emphasis on it because it's also possible to confirmation bias or whatever is a very real thing, where we only make connections at a certain time and we think there's some connection because we've done something very significant in practicing mindfulness. So it's easy to blow other things out of proportion, saying, oh, this coincidental thing that happened must have been because I was being mindful, because that's a very significant thing that I did, being mindful, practicing mindfulness. But that being said, I think there is room for the sort of a simplification. And as you simplify your life, it opens the channels up. It's like all the chaff has been, all the dirt has been washed away, so it opens up channels. It seems to be the case that to some extent karma is simplified. Like what you see with a person who has residual karma, it will come to them quicker than it would have if they had not practiced. So someone who in the next life was going to go to hell will instead suffer greatly in this life after having practiced mindfulness. Like Angulimala is an example. Angulimala would have been reborn in hell for sure because of all the evil that he did. But through the change that he went through, instead that evil came to him in this life and he was done with it. He was beaten and had his fingers broken, I think, or he was beaten anyway.
The next question, Bhante. How would one know if they begin to reach their limit for meditation sessions? If I feel inclined, could I just keep doing walking/sitting until I reach it?
You should always take a break after sitting. So do walking and sitting, then take at least a little break. But for sure, if you're practicing day and night, there's nothing wrong with that. Mindfulness is always valuable. I mean, you could argue that if you're just practicing without much connection with a teacher, that you could get off track. So you just have to be careful that you're not getting off track. It's pretty easy. It's easy for a beginner to get off track, but after you've gotten the basics down, it's not that easy to get off track, I wouldn't say. I mean, it's something special about mindfulness that it's pretty simple and pretty grounded. I mean, it's grounded in reality, so it's hard to get off track. The worst thing that happens is people to get discouraged and give up or afraid or that sort of thing. That happens. But to get on the wrong path with mindfulness, it's not as easy. Not as easy as with other meditations where you much, much more needed direct contact with the teacher. Because other meditations are all conceptual, right? It's not mindfulness, it's just conceptual. And the problem with concepts is they're infinite. There's no limits, there's no boundaries, there's no grounding in reality.
Bhante, it's Asanda here.
If you're practicing mindfulness, just keep practicing.
Bhante, can I ask a question? Bhante, you said letting go comes from clear seeing. However, can clear seeing come from letting go as a result of being forced to let go? For example, due to acute life-threatening severe illness? Or is that one and the same thing?
Well, you wouldn't let go until you saw clearly that it wasn't worth letting go of. I mean, there has to be something that leads you to let go.
Yes.
You don't just let go spontaneously.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying there. Thank you.
It's about understanding that things are not worth clinging to. I mean, it's sort of tautological. It's the very thing, it's the obvious reason why you let go. It's because you saw that it wasn't worth clinging to. It was worth letting go.
Sadhu Bhante.
But it's an important point that letting go only comes from seeing that, because quite often there's the mistake that you should push to let go or force yourself to let go. I mean, we don't use the word force so much, but that's basically what you're doing. People try to force themselves to let go, forcefully pushing or pushing things away, which is nothing like letting go.
The next question, Bhante. How do I stop constantly thinking about someone who has decided to stop talking to me?
Well, you don't. See, that is a problem that you're trying to solve. You should stop trying to solve a problem and start trying to understand a reality. The reality is you keep thinking about the person, and the reality is that they're not talking to you. There's probably other realities in there, like you want them to talk to you. You're upset that they're not talking to you. Those are all realities as well. If you start to look at the realities, you'll figure it out. You'll gain the understanding that'll lead you to let go. Basically, you'll see that it's not worth it. It's not valuable. mean, the thing is, we know this intellectually. We think it's not this isn't a valuable practice because we know this already. I know this is bad. I want to get rid of it. But if you knew it was bad, you wouldn't engage in it. You don't really know. You only know intellectually. So I don't know if you've read our booklet on how to meditate. That might be a good place to start. If you have, we have an at-home course that you could take to learn the basics of the practice, or you could come stay in our meditation center. That's the traditional way. See, here's an example of making things too easy. We have this at-home course that makes things easy, and then no one ever thinks to do the difficult thing of coming to meditate at a meditation center. I wonder if we're seeing now in modern times a decline in attendance at meditation centers around the world. Could just be us. Maybe Sri Lanka's a problem. Maybe our center's not as attractive as going to Thailand or something.
The next question, Bante. How do I'm sorry. I notice that my practice is sometimes focused, and I can put in a lot of effort for many days or weeks, but then I fall away from it and turn towards distractions. Is it reasonable for lay people to work towards a distraction-free lifestyle, like keeping the 8 precepts almost all of the time?
It's not easy. Reasonable is a bit of a, in this case, it's a bit vague, you know. You want to ask, is it reasonable that in the next year I'm able to do that? Then we could probably have a much more definite answer, and the answer would probably be no. But it's reasonable that someone can get there eventually. But I think probably what's more common is people trying to make it happen immediately rather than gradually. And that's, of course, much more difficult, if not impossible. Just often there's only, you're met with disappointment because it can't happen the way you want it to happen. So, yeah, I mean, the distraction-free lifestyle, just because you keep the 8 precepts doesn't mean you're not distracted. But I guess what you're talking about is distraction with things like entertainment and intoxication, I don't know. Food, distraction by food and romance and that sort of thing, relationships. So, I mean, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to. But what happens with lay people often is that they change their lives and they start to live very much like a monk. They would put on white clothes or white robes even. And that sort of thing is a protection because people just think they're weird. But I mean, put it politely, people start to acknowledge them as being sort of outside the fold or having left society. And they live simply, they give up many things and just make a real change to their lifestyle without becoming a monk. Some people do that. And then it's feasible. But it takes time and it takes effort. It's not going to happen by just continuing to live your life the way you're living it.
Bhante, I have a meditation question for you. Following the at-home course, I found myself having difficulties balancing the lay life with my meditation practice. I have found myself engaging in a lot more meditation following the at-home course. And then components of my lay life have not really received the attention that they deserve, primarily because I'm finding myself becoming more and more detached from the lay life that I'm leading. Is there a way to balance that, or simply walk away from those things, focusing on the meditation? Is that wise or unwise?
It is wise to leave behind as much as you can in favor of the practice of the Buddha's teaching.
Mm. I guess I'm trying to minimize the effect that has on the people around me, and I'm struggling to minimize the collateral damage that may cause in the future. Am I overthinking that, Bhante?
I don't know if there is real collateral damage. The question is whether there is or not. As take, for example, without knowing anything about your situation, take, for example, a romantic involvement, where you say, I can't leave because my romantic partner would be devastated. Not really a concern from a Buddhist perspective. On the other hand, you have small children who would starve to death. That's obviously, or would starve or be neglected. That's much more reasonable, obviously.
I have none of those, so okay, I'll just continue. Sadhu, Bhante.
The next question, Bhante. Noting multiple things simultaneously can feel cluttered, yet also seems to sharpen awareness. Is it proper to note other experiences between the rising and falling?
It's not possible to note things simultaneously. I'm not sure what you're referring to, what you're describing, because it's absolutely not possible. What would that even mean, to be noting two things at once? So that's not, so you're not really probably referring to simultaneity, whatever the word is. What you mean is switching rapidly back and forth, I guess. Right, as you say, between the rise, so you're rising and then noting something else and then falling. No, there's no real value in that. What you should do is, if something distracts you from the rising and falling, you should note it until it disappears. And then go back and wait for the next rising. So always start on the rising. Because what this does, putting this sort of structure down, it enforces or pushes you towards a little bit stronger focus. If you just freestyle it and note whatever you want in between, whatever you want, you're just more likely going to get more and more distracted. You want to have a little bit of focus. Give things the weight they deserve. Give things the attention that they deserve. Try and focus on one thing at a time. Within reason, So when things distract you, what I normally say to meditators, which I think is valuable, is if there's many things all at once, you should instead note distracted, rather than trying to catch each one.
The next question, Bante. What advice would you give for someone to lead a good and useful life?
Well, there's an interesting question, though. What advice would I give someone to lead a good and useful life? So, good and useful are two good words, really. I mean, it's a good phrasing. I like it. If we try to pick it apart a little bit and sort of be literal about the definition of these two words, I think we get a good answer, because they're different. Good and useful can be a little bit, I mean, they're different facets of the same thing, but the good side is, what advice I would give is to avoid evil and do good. To be dedicated to ethics and to understand what is proper ethics. There's you don't have to follow all ethical precepts, but the Buddhist ethical precept, keep the 5 precepts, keep the 8 precepts when you can. I mean, the best way with that is keep the 8 precepts on the holiday. So in the West, that would be every Saturday or Sunday or something like that. Keep the 8 precepts 1 day a week or something like that. And do good, be kind and generous. Be thoughtful about how you can help others. Go out of your way to, well, not out of your way so much, but make it a part of your way to help others, to be kind and generous and supportive, charitable. Those are the good deeds you can do. That's how you live a good life. The useful part, how do you live a useful life, is you go a little bit deeper and you train yourself in the qualities of mind that lead to doing good and refraining from evil. So you practice mindfulness. The most useful thing, I mean, it should be no surprise that what I'm going to say is the most useful thing is mindfulness. That is what is most valuable and really the true essence of what it means to live a useful life. The commentary says that when the Buddha taught the Satipatthana Sutta, the people there were inclined to practice the 4 Satipatthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And if someone wasn't, if they asked, "Are you practicing mindfulness?" and someone said, "Oh no, today I wasn't," they would say, "You're useless. Even though you were born a human, it's as though you're already dead." This is how you live a useful life. Practice mindfulness. Cultivate the 4 Satipatthana.
The next question, Bante. I find it difficult to put into practice asada, adinawa, nisarana, origin, cause, gratification, drawback, and escape. How do I make it more consistent in my practice?
Well, looking for consistency can be a problem. You have to appreciate the uncertainty, the dissatisfaction, and the uncontrollable nature of the mind. To some extent, that means understanding that you can't control your defilements. You can't force the mind to see those things. But as far as, so it's not about consistency so much as it is about repetition, seeing them again and again and again. So it isn't consistent, it just becomes more obvious, more and more apparent, until it becomes so apparent that the mind lets go. Looking for consistency is see that it's a hint that you're probably still clinging to control and self and permanent stability, and that clinging is part of the problem. You should let go of that clinging and just try and see again and again and again, whenever you can. Don't worry about consistency, worry about quantity. It's basically quantity, no? I guess you could say quality and quantity, but quality is not really an issue. You're either mindful or you're not. It's more about the quantity, the number of times that you're mindful. Mindfulness is like drops of water. You get enough drops of water and you can flood an entire village. Yeah.
Here's the last question in the first tier, Bhante. When meditating, I find that my mind is trying to focus on other mantras when rising and falling, which becomes overwhelming. For example, the mantra thinking occurring when rising and falling. It's hard to stop. Please give some advice.
You don't try to stop things, you just try and note them. If that's happening, you should note whatever it is. If it feels overwhelming, you should note overwhelmed. But most likely it's just distracted. The mind is not focused. Just note it, say distracted, until the mind calms down again. And then go back to the rising and falling. You should never note thinking unless it's just a single stray thought. If there's lots of thoughts, you should always note it as distracted. Thinking would just be when you catch a thought. If there's many thoughts or you're distracted by the thoughts, you should note distracted.
Bhante, we've reached our second hour, and you've answered all the questions in the first tier. Thank you so much for your wisdom and time, like always. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So
Thank you all. Thank you for making this session possible. Appreciate that there's people coming in the reader group. To join the reader group, you have to have completed at least the at-home course in our community. The idea is that we present a unified group. So I appreciate that there's old students still coming back. You don't have to be an ardent follower or anything, but you can take it as a good deed. I appreciate the good deed that you're coming here to support us. Old students coming back to support us. You're doing something, helping all of us, helping me, helping all the people who are listening. But sure this doesn't happen, and especially with Delauer and Subitsu and whoever else is helping behind the scenes make the broadcast possible. I appreciate that. I appreciate the kindness and the selflessness that you display by coming here and organizing this and reading and fun. Appreciate people coming and asking questions. I think probably we didn't get to all the questions, and it's true that sometimes the questions, there's rarely bad questions. I mean, I think really bad questions probably just get deleted because that would mean they're rude or inappropriate or something. But the problem is that a lot of questions are intellectual, and if you're coming here to ask questions about Buddhism, you should understand that that's not what we're about. What we're about is practicing mindfulness. So we try to provide as much and as comprehensive a set of teachings or services that allow people to learn how to be mindful. So we're not so much interested in answering questions if you're just looking for intellectual edification. But if you're coming here to listen and hear these teachings and you hear these questions and you hear the answers to these questions, you should understand what we're about. That we're about guiding you to learn how to be mindful. And we have those services. So appreciate people coming and asking questions about their practice. That's the best, because we have to keep that door open, or people will flounder. No? Sometimes it's just the answer to a question that is keeping you stuck. So we do the best we can to provide answers to the best of our abilities, and appreciate that you come with those. But also appreciate everyone coming with questions about Buddhism and Dhamma. It's just that sometimes it's not really what we're about. And it's important to understand that it's not really what Buddhism is about either. Buddhism isn't so much about scholasticism. It's about practical application. Buddha was a very practical sort of person, teacher, giving advice that was immediately applicable. I want to appreciate everyone who comes out to these, and hope that the goodness that you carry with you, that is evident in your interest in the Buddha's teaching, if nothing else, may that goodness protect you and guide you as it has guided you to the Buddha. May it guide you to the Dhamma, to becoming the Sangha, part of the Sangha. May the power of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, the power of all the goodness that we have performed on this day, all the goodness in sharing the Dhamma and in organizing this community, may it all protect and guide us to higher and greater realization and attainment of peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. May all beings be free. Sadhu.
Thank
Sadhu,
you.
sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Bhante.